Good morning. We find ourselves at the midpoint in the second week of our great penitential season of Lent. And specifically, today, Wednesday, is the feast of an American saint about whom I'm not so certain many people know a great deal. And her name is Saint Katharine Drexel. And there are many very good biographies written about her, but I think the best way to come to know her is to know her herself through her own writings and communications. Katharine Drexel was born about in the mid-19th century and born to a very prominent, wealthy Catholic family in Philadelphia. And growing up, she was a product of Catholic schools. She was a very devout young lady. And as she grew into adulthood, she wanted to continue to not just practice her faith, but be active in works of charity. And due to the prominence of her family, she was able, through the kind offices of the Archbishop of Philadelphia, to have a private audience with Pope Leo XIII at that time. And the purpose for her wanting to speak to the Pope, she really wanted to have the Pope's guidance and direction as to how she should devote herself and her considerable fortune to Catholic works of charity, Catholic organizations. And as she was in the presence of Pope Leo XIII, and she began to describe what was on her mind, at least, the Pope very nicely interrupted her and just simply said to her, "What about you?" Meaning, as he explained, all that she wanted to do was very excellent and very virtuous. But what he was asking of her, why don't you, as a young single Catholic woman, devote yourself in your entire life to these good works of charity? And subsequently, St. Katharine Drexel was inspired by that meeting with Pope Leo XIII. She founded a religious congregation of sisters, specifically to serve the African American and Native American poor in the United States. And again, you can read biographies about her, and she did tremendous work for the religious instruction and conversion of countless numbers of individuals. And she concentrated much of her charity in two areas: hospital work and education. Xavier University in New Orleans was established by St. Katharine Drexel specifically to offer a solid Catholic higher education to African Americans, and it's still in existence today. St. Katharine Drexel established several convents and missions to serve on the reservations where Native Americans were living at that time in the central and western portion of the United States, a few even in the deep South at that time. But when you consider what St. Katharine Drexel accomplished in her life, and she lived a long life, she died in 1955, we see in more recent times we are far more familiar with, what an individual, a devout Catholic woman, was able to accomplish for the greater honor and glory of God, and certainly for the betterment of so many peoples who, without her, would not have had the opportunities that she was able to afford them in education, in serving the poor, in helping people rise out of poverty so that they would then continue, because of her good work, what she had begun. One side note is that many of her vocations in subsequent years came from those African American and Native American women who came in contact with her first group of sisters, and through their good example, they too were inspired to do what Katharine Drexel did, devote her very life to the honor and glory of God by serving those with great needs. And so we celebrate her feast today in our church calendar, and she is one of those very eminent and very blessed Catholic citizens of the United States who not only served the church so well, but made the United States better for their active and apostolic faith. May you continue to be devoted to your Lenten practices of prayer, penance, and good works as we continue our journey to Holy Week and to Easter.